Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show, where we celebrate every single day the amazing people who are working in the trenches to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. I had a great conversation last Wednesday with the Commissioner of Public Safety, Sean Tyndall, and we talked. Just an hour-long discussion about all the things that he's involved in. One of the things I pointed out, incidentally, during that conversation was that he is a member of a strong bench of political up-and-comers in our state. You think about people like Shad White, the state auditor, and what's he going to do next? You think about Lynn Fitch, the current attorney general. What's she going to do next? And Michael Watson, and you hear some private sector names mentioned, but a strong bench. In fact, as I mentioned on that show last Wednesday, Frank Bordeaux, who is an insurance executive here in coastal Mississippi and someone that I enjoy talking about the insurance challenges with, is also head of the Republican Party for Mississippi. And one of the things he said to me on a show not too long ago was he didn't look forward to the future because some really, really good people are going to be running against some really, really good people. And it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. But Sean is the Director of Public Service in Mississippi, and we kind of broke it all down. He has a tremendous amount of responsibility. He came into that job after being an assistant district attorney. He was a senator. He was a judge. Really laid some terrific groundwork to enable him to go into this position as an appointee by Governor Tate Reeves. But we talked about a lot of stuff. But one of the interesting points in our conversation was an effort that is underway at the Department of Public Safety around wellness and what they call the Wellness and Resiliency Program. And he was just pointing out that morale is really important, and you can think about the challenges whether you work in the Bureau of Narcotics or the Mississippi Highway Patrol or any number of other agencies, 11 of them that are part of the Department of Public Safety. There's a lot of challenges. They got a lot to learn. They get a lot of stuff thrown at them, and trying to find that balance between work and family so that you can have a happy employee is really important. It's sort of like every CEO deals with. But if you think about Sean, he's the CEO of the Department of Public Safety, and he's focused on this. And our friend Johnny Poulos, who's going to be joining us here in just a second, I have a long history with Johnny Poulos, incidentally, and we'll share with you a little bit about that here in just a second. Have been doing some work in the Mississippi Highway Patrol area, and more recently have begun to sort of work on the entire scope of the Department of Public Safety. And I thought it would be a good idea, based on that conversation and just wanting to catch up with my friend Johnny, to have him come on and chat with him about this wellness program, but more importantly, just to find out what's going on in his life these days. So without any further ado, let me welcome my friend Johnny Poulos back to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Johnny?
Doing great, Ricky, and thanks for having me today.
Yes, good to see you. So where are you sitting right now?
So I'm actually at the Mississippi Law Enforcement Officers Training Academy in Pearl, Mississippi. Had a training class this morning, so they're actually doing some renovations in the building. So if you see some blank walls, they're in the process of painting.
That's right. That's right. Hey, listen, Johnny, when I think of you, I have so many pleasant thoughts go back to before Hurricane Katrina, but certainly right after Hurricane Katrina, when we cranked up the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal. And Governor Barber, man, he was spending a lot of time in Washington. He was spending a lot of time in coastal Mississippi. And when he would come here, as you well knew, he spent a lot of time at the Sun Herald because that's where we had a meeting facility. And our conference room was often available to the Governor's Commission. And many members of his staff, Joe Cloyd and a long list of others, actually worked out of my conference room for well over a year after Hurricane Katrina, just because there wasn't a place for them to work. But you would often travel with the governor down here, and it became almost like matter of fact there for a while. We saw each other so often, but man, you had a wonderful perch to see some incredible leadership in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, didn't you?
I did, Ricky. And, about a month ago, Governor Barber was down on the coast, and I had the opportunity to talk with him. And we relived a lot of experiences during that time and while he was governor. And I did have the opportunity to tell him that was some of the greatest times in my career when he was governor. I learned a lot from him. And I use some of those practices every single day in this job that I'm currently in.
Yeah, he and I can honestly say that he became a friend during that process, and we check in with each other from time to time. He's been on my show obviously a couple of times, but it's good to stay in touch with him. He had that really difficult situation as a result of his wreck that he had to recover from. He's lucky to be alive, to be honest with you, and he has, he's finally starting to get around and starting to feel better. And I mean, he's kind of the Energizer Bunny in a way, because there's no stopping this guy. Still one of the most important political minds in the entire United States. And as you saw and you got to personally observe, he has a mind like a steel trap. He knows everybody, and he remembers their names, and he remembers situations. I don't think we'll ever see another leader in this state like him.
I agree. And I can tell you, going back to how his memory is just unbelievable. And that was one of the things that he educated me on, the importance of remembering someone's name.
Yeah.
I can remember the day that we had that conversation. It's hard to believe it's been 18 years ago, but it was during that period of recovery for Katrina that we spent a lot of time together.
Yeah. Listen, I'll tell you a quick story, and I've shared this on the show at least once before, but over 3.5 years, the chances that most people didn't hear it. But one of the things that was, again, because I was a vice chairman and I worked with him to form the governor's commission, we spent an awful lot of time together. And I remember once in an editorial board meeting, we were talking about, kind of where we were. It was maybe 3 or 4 months after the storm. It wasn't much longer than that. But by then things were beginning to really start to move, and we were beginning to get a handle on the kind of money we were going to need to help coastal Mississippi come back. And so he came to an editorial board meeting, and we were having a long conversation about sort of where we were, the work that he had been doing in Washington, the work that he had been doing on the ground, the way the Governor's Commission had been feeding into his process, what it was going to take so he could begin to get a fix on the number, the billions of dollars that we were going to need for recovery. And we were kind of breaking it all down. And so one of the reporters brought up something in Waveland, something specific in Waveland. Can you, of course, I mean, if there was a specific ground zero for Hurricane Katrina, it was Waveland. I mean, right. All of coastal Mississippi for sure, but if there was a coastal Mississippi ground zero, it was Waveland. So you imagine the work that had to be done in Waveland to get Waveland back. And so there was one specific project, one very specific project it was a grant in Waveland. And somebody asked about it. And it's like he opened up this file in his mind around that specific grant. And he started quoting numbers and details that were just, and in the scheme of everything that he had to think about, the fact that he could talk about that specific grant and the numbers related to it, I was like blown away. You were getting to see how when some information got into that brain, it usually didn't leave his brain, which is one of the reasons he became such a good lobbyist, incidentally, because he just remembered people and situations and numbers and names, and it was fascinating. But more importantly than that, it was just simply just watching his leadership in action, the way he inspired us to want to, build back bigger and better. And it wasn't just a slogan for him; he was driven to do it. That was really important. And hey, the other thing, I said a couple of things. The other thing is, as cell phones, and this is something that Sean Tindall and I talked about, as cell phones have become part of the reality of where we are today, in your work before you got into your current position, you spent a lot of time working with kids, going to high schools and talking about, don't drink and drive, don't do drugs and drive, especially don't do texting and driving, this whole notion of distracted driving. And I mentioned to Sean that we were going down the road when I drive to the Delta, which is almost weekly, I'll watch people pass me, and over 50% of the people who pass me are going much faster than I'm going, and they're also have their phone up, texting or reading something on their phone. And man, this is the reality of the moment. We don't live in a safe situation when we're on our roads these days, are we? Excuse me, do we?
The problem, Ricky, we have become way too comfortable with technology. And I say that based off of your observation when you're on the roads. Everyone has cell phones today. It is so easy to use this technology, but what we forget, the car does not drive itself. There's some out there that do, but the majority of the vehicles that are on our roadways are we have to drive those vehicles. And that's why we continue to work the number of crashes that we work due to driver distraction. Again, we've become too comfortable, and we take for granted when it comes to perception and reaction time. Hey, look, the human brain.
Hey, let's do this. Let's pick it up. We're at the end of this segment. We're with Johnny Poulos from Department of Public Safety from Mississippi. We'll pick it up right there when we come back on the other side. We'll come back to distracted driving in just a second, but we have my friend Johnny Poulos from the Department of Public Safety. And when I think about Poulos, when I just think about the name Poulos, I think about Poulos Tire. And that's where I have gone to get my cars and trucks worked on for my entire career. I mean, even at one point, the Sun Herald used them as their maintenance company. And so Johnny's family is involved in that, and I consider them family. When I walk in, they treat me like I'm literally a member of the family. I mean, it's just incredible. But you are lucky to be part of a wonderful family, aren't you, my friend?
I am, Ricky, and I know our family appreciates you saying that. And you're looked at as family as well. When it comes to automotive, that's where I began my career, basically in private sector, was automotive repair, and worked for David, who you know very well. Later on in my life, I actually purchased a Firestone retail store and owned it for 8 years prior to becoming a state trooper. So automotive repair is also in my blood, along with law enforcement. And I learned a lot about people working in private sector as well.
Yeah, I know you did. Hey, we were talking about distracted driving. And, one of the points that I made with Commissioner Sean Tyndall was that you think about 51% of Mississippians live in rural areas. I mean, over half of Mississippians live in rural areas. So that's country roads and two-way highways. And not that an interstate is any more forgiving, but the reality is you venture out of your lane for a split second on most of the highways in Mississippi, to be honest with you. And you're going to have a bad situation. And too many bad situations are happening in Mississippi because of distracted driving, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we've become too comfortable with technology. You use two-lane highways in Mississippi. We all know there's very few two-lane highways that they're straight. I mean, like Highway 45, one knows that's a straight shot. But a lot of two-lane highways in Mississippi are very curvy. All it takes is one time to look at your phone, and the next thing you know, you're running off the roadway, possibly colliding with a tree. So it's still a huge issue for us in Mississippi when it comes to distracted driving and crashes.
Yeah, it is a really important one. So you had a long career. I'm trying to think now. How long have you actually been there?
So I started my 25th year with the agency in October.
Gosh, you've seen so much change in those years, haven't you?
I have. And, Ricky, I think back of going to your office at the Sun Herald and running some things by you to get your opinion and some advice on how do I approach some of these driving issues in Mississippi. And it's hard to believe it's been almost 20 years ago.
Isn't that something, man? It's amazing to me. It's like when I think about how long, obviously I've been around a while. I'm 66 years old now, and I don't feel 66. I mean, I don't. I've worked really hard to take care of myself, but man, I've been around a while, and I've seen a lot of change over a lot of years. And this show's given me such a great opportunity to reconnect with people like you, for example, people that I had such great relationships along the way. At the end of the day, it's a small world. It amazes me the people who burn bridges because, what goes around comes around. It's a small world. I try to always approach life that way. I know as a publisher, sometimes you make people upset. I mean, it's the way it is. We write stories people don't like or write editorials people don't like. But I always tried to keep friendships intact when I could. Although there were those who just burned the bridge, there were those who scorched the bridge when we did something they didn't like, and it's something as a publisher you sort of get used to. But it's been great reconnecting. It really has. I've enjoyed that very much so, and this in that way, this show has been a real gift for me. But you think back now, 25 years, you've seen so much change during that time, and you're actually sitting right now at the Law Enforcement Training Academy as we speak. Think about the changes at the Law Enforcement Training Academy over those 25 years. It's unbelievable. A law enforcement officer today almost has to be a lawyer, don't they?
Absolutely. And in law enforcement, it's constantly evolving. I mean, situations are constantly changing out. Society is constantly changing. And for law enforcement to keep up with the demands, we have to evolve and change as well. So sometimes it's a struggle, but we have to stay the course. When you sign up to be a law enforcement officer, it's not an easy job, but it's a rewarding job. And we're fortunate to have men and women that want to continue to enter into this profession.
Yeah, and I just want to remind people who didn't hear my conversation with Sean Tyndall, the Mississippi Highway Patrol, the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, the Driver's License Services, Homeland Security, Public Safety and Planning, Mississippi Law Enforcement Officer Training Academy, what we were just mentioning, the Mississippi Crime Lab, Medical Examiner's Office, Crime Stoppers. And more recently, Capitol Police was added, and also MDOT officers as well. So 11 different agencies are part of this overall agency. And so there's a lot to say grace over, isn't there, my friend?
Absolutely. And continuing to grow. The agency continues to grow. Again, going back to society, the perception of law enforcement in society today, there's a huge demand, and a lot of times, Ricky, the public doesn't realize, it's a huge effort to go out and provide public safety to the people in our communities around the state. But we are very fortunate in the state of Mississippi to have a huge support system in place from the public.
Hey, are you currently the longest tenured employee there?
No, I would say we have probably maybe 10 or 12 other employees that have longer years of service than I do.
Wow, that's interesting. But because of all this, excuse me, because the Department of Public Safety has to say grace over so much, because the laws are changing rapidly, public perception is changing rapidly, the focus on customer service, the focus on de-escalation, with people coming into situations, you never know what they're going to face, and you guys work really hard to de-escalate. I mean, that takes the stress that officers and just any employee could encounter is very significant. And that's one of the reasons why you guys have been really focused on this Project Officer Wellness and Resiliency Program, to really focus on how to help people find balance in their lives in spite of the stress that they're dealing with at work. This is something you guys have taken on, full bore, isn't it?
Yes, and we had to, Ricky. 2 years ago when Commissioner Tyndall and Colonel Ginn came to me about putting a wellness program together, I'm going to be honest with you, I was very apprehensive about taking that, just for a number of reasons, but mainly I'm one of the older generation troopers, and I think you can relate to how we were raised. We were raised a certain way that we just dealt with things, and the suck it up mentality. We were raised like that. Well, law enforcement is a lot like that as well, more so. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm the right one for this position. But I can tell you, after 2 years of drilling down, talking to other law enforcement agencies, not only in Mississippi, but around the country, of how important wellness is in an agency or department, and you have to make it priority, especially in today's world where retention and recruitment is a huge issue. No one wants to be in law enforcement anymore. So we had to come up with ways of not only to get more people to want to apply to the agency, but to also take care of the ones we currently have in place.
Hey, but Johnny, I would argue your experience, so say to quote you, your old school experience and this notion of sucking it up, it actually made you the perfect person for this role because, asking someone to suck it up is not the best approach, as you've learned really well. What you really want people to do is talk about what's inside them and to learn methods and processes they can deploy themselves to be able to process it so they don't hold stuff inside. Right. That actually has served you well, having that experience, hasn't it?
It has. And I've had to look at the other side of things, of what happens when you do not talk about things. We keep packing things in. And you know what happens when you continue to pack things in? Eventually, it's going to overflow. And in law enforcement, the unfortunate part about that, when it overflows, we usually make bad decisions. A lot of people don't realize, Ricky, you do, but law enforcement officers can see things in one day that the average citizen may never see in a lifetime. And we do that every day, throughout the year, and it just becomes part of what we do. The problem is it's going to come back at some point where you have to deal with it. And usually we don't deal with it in the right way. And not only does it affect, the law enforcement officer, it actually affects their families. And that's why it's so important with the wellness program now that we're identifying those issues, we're addressing those issues in the right way, and we're trying to normalize those situations to where, no, you don't.
Let's do this. Let's pick it up right there on the other side. We're at the end of the segment. We're with Johnny Poulos with the Department of Public Safety, and we'll pick it up right there when we get on the other side. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I have my dear friend, Johnny Poulos, who is with the Department of Public Safety, and he's the project officer for the Wellness and Resiliency Program. When you think about resiliency, which I talk about on the show all the time, I mean, we've learned a lot as a state because of tornadoes and droughts and other challenges, especially hurricanes. We've learned what resiliency is all about. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back. And when we're talking about, officer wellness specifically to employees of the Department of Public Safety, and you're right. I mean, they can see in one day what most the average person never sees, to be honest with you. And as you said, I know, and I do because I'm a former paramedic. I had the opportunity to be out there on the road, and I wish there's some things, and that you've been there yourself before, Johnny. There's some things that I have seen in my lifetime that I wish I could unsee, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I experienced as a paramedic, as a very young age, I'm talking about I was a paramedic at 18, 19 years old, and worked part-time for a few years after that, and then have faced many situations that have needed my services, unfortunately, since then. But what happens is if you don't process it properly, it just kind of holds up inside you, and it creates a post-traumatic stress syndrome, and that can be debilitating. It can really be debilitating. And, you think about the straw that broke the camel's back, that stuff holds up, and then the most minor thing occurs and someone reacts to it. And it wasn't that situation that caused the problem. It's everything that happened prior to that. And being focused on that in a way that keeps, officer well-being in mind is it can be a very beneficial thing because you get to see people processing a lot of that stress, and it is something you got to stay focused on, but it's really paid dividends already, hasn't it?
Yes, and we've made great strides in the wellness program, again, identifying certain things that when it comes to normalizing what a law enforcement officer or a first responder, what they experience out there. I use the word normalize. That is something as a law enforcement officer we we just don't look at it that way. We don't like to think about anything that we perceive as weakness. We don't like to talk about some of the things that we've witnessed or been through, because at the end of the day, we're the protectors. I mean, we are the protectors, and we do not like to show any level of weakness. But what we have found out for law enforcement officers and their families to have happy and productive lives, we have to identify these things, and we have to sit down and just realize some of the things we see are not normal, but the reactions and the feelings that we have are normal. And we're trying to implement that now into training with the new officers that are coming on board, to let them know, hey, this is going to happen to you in your career, but we now have something in place that's not only going to help you, but it's also going to help your family to deal with these type of issues, move on, and again, to have happy and productive lives.
Hey, after Hurricane Katrina, we actually had a psychologist work at the Sun Herald full time for, I don't know, I remember it 6 months, but maybe it was longer than that actually. And it became quite acceptable, actually, when it was time to go sit down with the counselor, because a lot of our employees, especially the reporters, saw things they'd never seen before. But you think about, in our case, 66 or 67 employees lost everything they owned. Some lost family members, many lost friends. They had significant needs, and they needed to learn how to process that. And I think about when I was a paramedic, if there would have been a program in place that said, look, you're going to have these thoughts, or you're going to have these situations, and when you have this feeling, the anxiety the next time the bell rings, if you're having this anxiety, the reason you're having that is this. And if you have that feeling, just call this number or go see this person, and do it quick. Don't wait. Because these situations will add up and it will get worse. If they'd have had a program like that, man, I'd have jumped on that in a second. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to process this stuff as it happens. And I love the fact that you guys are focused on work-life balance, involving the family and the overall solution. It is holistic, isn't it?
Absolutely. And another factor about the wellness program, Ricky, that a lot of people do not like to talk about, but it is a factor, and it is suicide by law. To give you an idea, for 2023 year to date, we've lost 45 officers in the line of duty to gunfire. Okay, yeah. 45 officers have lost their lives to gunfire for 2023 nationwide.
Yeah.
The number of officers that have taken their lives with suicide is 85. We've lost 85 law enforcement officers nationwide for 2023 to suicide.
Yeah.
So if that's not a sobering statistic, I don't know what is. It's an issue, and it's something we talk about. Again, a lot of law enforcement officers don't like to talk about it because there's a stigma associated with any type of mental wellness, but it is an issue. And we're normalizing those type of conversations, again, to let officers know, hey, this is a normal reaction of what you're having due to what you witnessed or what you went through. So again, the wellness program is working very well for us. We're wanting to expand it. I think Commissioner Tyndall might have mentioned that to you. The program started with the Mississippi Highway Patrol, but we're now expanding the program to other law enforcement entities that are underneath the umbrella of DPS, and we're just going to make it bigger and better.
I've had a focus on this show around teen suicide, and Paige Roberts, who's the director of the Jackson County Chamber and just a terrific community leader, introduced me to a woman. Her name is Emma Benoit, and she attempted suicide, and as a result, unfortunately, got a spinal cord injury. But she's on a mission now to explain and help others who might have these thoughts why they need to, seek help, and it's okay to do, seek help. But one of the points that Emma made is that we too often resort to what she calls toxic positivity. In other words, someone's having a difficult time, and they say, "Oh, it's going to get better. Everything's going to get better." And that's just the answer. And she said that's not the answer. The answer is that you have to learn to process the situation. And she goes in quite some detail about that. But what she, in her case, and what we've learned a lot about this suicide situation is they're not literally seeking to kill themselves, but they're seeking to relieve the pain. And
Right.
and so she says if we could just focus on that and have conversations about it, we might be able to really turn this situation around as it relates to teen suicide. But that's true about suicide in general. And
Suicide.
yeah,
You mentioned that things are going to get better. We say that all the time in law enforcement when we're dealing with some really tough issues. Well, it's going to get better. Tomorrow is a new day. But you have to make that happen. You have to have things in place to make things get better for tomorrow to be a better day. You have to.
Emma said that Emma, she talks passionately about how toxic positivity was not helpful to her, and in fact, maybe she was, it made things more difficult for her because it never got processed and it just got worse, and that's why it's important. But I think about the stresses that officers have to face in their day-to-day world. It's not just the things they have to remember because of the changing nature of the training that is occurring, but too many people's view toward police officers in general and the pressure that officers are under, as we said at the beginning, to de-escalate a situation. And then when things don't go the way they're planned, and the reverberating negative impact that can have on someone's psyche, I mean, there's a lot to focus on. And if I can't imagine, now that you've done this for 2 years, can you imagine where we would be if you didn't have that program?
Oh, I can tell you, we would probably have a lot, maybe not a lot less employees, but I can tell you that there'll be some employees that are currently employed that would have left the agency because we did not have those resources in place to provide assistance not only to the officers but their family members as well. We're a family, but we've got to add more programs, I should say, to really build the family, to make the spouses, the children actually feel part of the law enforcement family. And talking about the children, I can tell you for a fact that we really haven't looked deep into what type of support system do we have in place for children. We don't. They have parents that go out every single day. They worry about, are they going to come home? Is my mom or my dad, are they going to come home? We've never really put too much thought into that, but I can tell you the family aspect of our wellness program, that's a major component.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome to hear that. Hey, when we come back with Johnny Poulos for the final segment, we'll find out what else is going on in his world these days. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. When I say the name Johnny Poulos, I bet there are a lot of adults out there who can remember Johnny Poulos coming to your high school. I don't know how often did you do that? Over how many years did you go to high schools and visit with them?
So in 2005, I started traveling to the high schools, mainly on the coast, spent a lot of time on the coast. And then the administration said, it's time for you to start traveling. So I've been to every county, Ricky, in Mississippi, in some type of capacity to speak about traffic safety. And I can tell you, talking about how time flies and getting up in age, I actually had a young lady approach me in Walmart 2 months ago, and she said, "Are you Johnny Poulos?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she is, "Well, I just want to let you know, I hope my daughter gets a chance to hear your driving presentation." She said, you gave a presentation at the Albertville High School when I was a senior 20 years ago.
Wow.
So do the math on that. Her daughter now is of driving age. She's 15 years old. And I spoke to her mother about 20 years ago. So how time flies.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I have had that experience in a slightly different way, but my thing when my kids were growing up was to coach. I coached soccer and baseball a little bit, but mostly soccer. All their soccer teams, they're the whole way up, all three kids. and had a lot of success and a lot of fun. And over the years, as you can imagine, if you're doing that every year through 3 kids, imagine, I don't know how long, what span, 10 or 15 years that spans, of coaching, and touched so many wonderful kids during that process and taught them about winning in life. I just loved being around kids. And I'll hear from one of them every now and then and say, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "No," because the cars, they don't look the same as they used to look when I coached them. And they would say, yeah, you coached me. I never forget this, or I never forgot that. I love that. I love, what you're describing to me about those classes, and I'm not surprised at all to hear that, is the generational impact that you had. And there's no way to ever quantify this, but you probably saved a bunch of lives telling those stories, because I know you let it all hang out when you had those speeches. You did not leave a stone unturned. You wanted kids to understand what the outcome was going to be and what it was going to look like if they made a bad decision. And
not only for their parents as well, to make sure parents understood the responsibilities of making sure they know where their children are wearing seatbelts, and you want your son or daughter to walk back through that door as well.
Yeah, we saw we had a little Wi-Fi blip there. We got the bottom line on what you're saying, that it was important for the parents to be engaged in the process, because you wanted the kids to come back to them. And you and I experienced more than once, but one in particular, horrific accident at St. Patrick High School, and that kind of changed the course of history for a lot of children, didn't it?
It sure did. And, I'll never forget, it was Mercy Cross.
Yeah, Mercy Cross, right, for sure, before St. Patrick.
And I did the presentation, and the Sun Herald came and covered that story that day, and it was on the front page of the Sun Herald. And I can tell you, we definitely, when I say we, you played a major role on that. Sun Herald played a major role in that, and getting that message out to not only teens but parents in general of how important safe driving is.
Yeah, that's such a big deal. Hey, listen, you're at the twilight of your career, but it is interesting that you get into a position, working on this Department of Public Safety Wellness Program in a way that can really make an impact and draw from all these years of experience. I mean, in fact, you are in a great position to be the guy to help lead this, because you've been communicating with so many people over so many years, and you had all this experience. What a great way to make an impact as you enter sort of the twilight of your career.
Absolutely. And it's been an honor and a privilege for me to take this program and work with some of the people that truly believe in it. As with Commissioner Tindall, I can tell you, he's got a young family. He's got teenagers that are driving now. He knows the importance of that. He probably mentioned driver's ed. That's a big thing for him to be able to to want to push that and make that happen. And I'm just honored to play the role that I'm playing in with the department right now.
Yeah, I actually referred to the bill that he wants to have passed the legislature for mandatory driver's education. Once you understand how important it is, especially in this day of distracted driving, it should be a no-brainer. This should be a no-brainer. But we should literally force a whole new level of driver education. And I think we'll have success in getting that through, and as a result, we're going to save a lot of lives. Especially, I mean, if you see, to me, what gets measured gets done. So all you have to do is look at what the data is saying. The data is saying we better act. we better act, and we better act quickly. If we don't, we're going to pay for it in the future, and there's going to be a lot of hurt families as a result of it. And I mean, that's where you're coming from as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Mississippi consistently ranks either first or second in the nation in teenage driving fatalities. And if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will. And you can do some research on that. Probably for the last 10 years, Ricky, Mississippi consistently ranks first or second in the nation in teenage driving fatalities.
Wow, that's just, hard to hear. And the legislature, we have seen this many times before. The legislature, when they get their arms around something like that, they can make change happen rapidly. So let's hope that that's the case again this time. Hey, as we're kind of winding down the show, what do you have exciting going on during the holidays?
So, well, a lot of honeydews. When I'm home from Jackson, the wife, she always has things planned for me to do. But we enjoyed this, the holiday weekend. My youngest son, that is a trooper. He had taken some time off, so we spent time with him. My oldest son is in marketing, and he works in Atlanta, so he was able to come down, and we really enjoyed spending time with the family.
It's fun. I've been lucky. I have 3 kids. 2 live here. 1, unfortunately, lives in New York. 1 is actually in India as we speak, working with a client for Price Waterhouse. And he asked for it. He wanted to be on the international consulting team, and that's where he is. So he's going to be traveling the world. But we hope to see him between Christmas and New Year's. I think he's planning to take a good stretch of time off, and we'll get to go up and do some hunting together and spend some quality time together. But it's just great to have. I mean, listen, the holidays is a great opportunity to reflect. It's an opportunity to count your blessings. And, I know I do that. I try to live in the moment as best I can, but holidays is a great opportunity to say, man, thank goodness for what it is. And then develop some goals for the next year. What are we going to do in the coming year that's going to make our mark and leave our legacy? And, that's what it's about. I mean, it sounds like that's what it's for you as well.
Absolutely. And, I've always end presentations by saying tomorrow is not promised. And we have to remember that and never take anything for granted.
Never take any. I mean, the one thing that we can know for sure is this moment. That's what we can know. We can't do anything about what happened yesterday. It is done. And we can certainly plan for the future, but that's the bottom line. So anyway, that's it. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Ricky, same here. And thanks a lot. And thank you for what you do for us in Mississippi.
Yeah. God bless you, my friend. God bless you. Hey, listen, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Ricky.